So welcome to the kind of beta test for our first version of the Deep Analysis podcast. We're going to try to manage a fairly strict format about this. And those of you who've had the misfortune to work with us before will know managing a strict format is not necessarily very easy for us. And this is going to be one that's going to be 3 topics and only 3 and 30 minutes strictly on that. So the idea is to try and take 3 things which are actively within our purview right now and give you a little bit more information than we're doing in writing. And we're going to start with that. I'm back at my home office in the UK, but Alan is not in his office in Philadelphia. He's in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. So our first topic today, which seems very topical, bear in mind you've been there for probably a couple of hours now, is Alan, why are you in Brazil?
Yeah, why am I in Brazil? I am in Brazil to give a keynote tomorrow and then a workshop the following day and then turn around and come back. I was trying to work it out. I don't know if this is my 5th or 6th. I think it's the 6th trip down here to Brazil over the years. And I love this place. And I love the people here. I mean, I'm talking about Brazil in general, but in particular, the people who run this conference. You know, it's called Information Show, but if you go to the website, you'll see that actually it's a conglomeration of shows and topics and themes. And that's what's so interesting because it aligns so much with deep analysis and what we've been doing over the years. In the sense that, you know, back in the day, you had your document file-centric conferences, and then you had your process and automation center. And this one is all in one, right? So it's information, RPA, AI. And it's fascinating how it's developed. It's a pretty big conference, actually. And then there's which I won't be doing afterwards, there's a sort of, I don't know how many, I think it's 7 or 8 road shows or something like, you know, around the country. And that sort of gives you a flavor for just how big Brazil is, right?
Both in terms of population, in terms of IT market, and just geographical size, all 3 are huge, right?
It is. It really is. And it's a very advanced one, you know, much more so. And I've learned to at my cost, really, to be honest with you. When I first came down here, maybe 20 years ago, you know, coming down with the impression, oh, I'll tell them all about the wonderful advances in North America and Europe, to find out that they were already way ahead of us. So it's always a sort of, I mean, it swings and roundabouts, right? But you learn from each other, and I certainly learn so much here. And so tomorrow, I won't talk about it too much, but it very much aligns with deep analysis and our work. The keynote's on the future of intelligent automation, and then I'm going to do a workshop the next day, which is sort of on our best sort of practices for procurement. But it's a workshop, not a lecture, and on the conference, I think there's going to be a sort of more of a focus on AI, RPA, etc. Because they are very well. AI in particular you do need to approach procuring technology very differently to traditional legacy sort of application, a CRM system or whatever, a logistics system or something. So yes, I'm only here a couple of days. It's a long way here. And it's a long journey back, but I think it's worth it. And for what it's worth, it's a test, but we've translated one report, Dan's IDEP report, into Portuguese, and I think the plan is to do for the one we're going to talk about today, the work intelligence report, to get that translated as well. So lots of reasons for being here, but they're good partners, they're good people, and it just helps us not be so US-centric as well, to come and learn from other people.
Oh, it's always good to do that. And just if anybody who's listening or watching, or a combination of the two, if we're referring to any particular reports or books or any other offline materials, you don't have to take notes. There's not a test at the end of this, but what we'll do is we'll make sure we provide hyperlinks to all of that information in the show notes for this, during which will be on whichever format you're receiving them on. There'll be some notes associated with it that will provide links to the reports and that kind of thing, so you're not missing out on anything, not making notes and paying attention to it. What's interesting there is obviously the thing you're doing tomorrow is referring to the work analysis, market analysis on work intelligence and work intelligence in general, which is something which we've been working on for 6-9 months, pretty much since whenever I joined Deep Analysis last year, and now we've got our market analysis coming out, and it's coming out. So probably by the time that people are watching this or listening to this, that market analysis will come out. Now, it's something that we've been working on for quite a while. We put out an initial report in January, which kind of explained our feeling of how the world is. And now for the second report, we're kind of quantifying that world, how big the market is, what are the various piece parts of that, and how that fits together. Let's just take a couple of steps back to where we started. You and I were working actually together about 10 years ago, and writing and researching stuff on what was referred to at that time as the future of work, which is all very exciting. Lots of money was going into it. We were listening to, big vendors like IBM and by Google, amongst others, spending quite a lot of money and time investing in this. And where we ended up with, I think, probably slightly disappointing for both of us here, was actually marginally improving the sort of UI and UX of existing tools rather than rethinking it. So we ended up with experiments like Google Inbox that was lovely. IBM spent quite a lot launching a product called IBM Verse that was very interesting, very expensively produced, and didn't really get a lot of traction in the market. Now, the kind of future of work stayed there, but work remained kind of the same. And then when we reacquainted ourselves with this topic, last year, you'd gone away and been working a lot more on automation topics, and also starting to dip your toe into the first numbers around task mining and process mining. So from your side, how do those topics start to converge together? Because when you started, they were quite separate topics.
Well, they were and they weren't. I mean, from an analyst perspective, 100%, completely different silos, covered by different analysts. But it's a twofold thing. One, I'll be careful how long I spend on this bit, but I started my career as a process analyst, right? And I've always been fascinated with the process and automation side because some people may know this, most won't probably, but I actually trained as an analytical psychotherapist, and it's the one area of technology where it is basically half psychology, half technology, right? I mean, you can have all the perfect templates of how perfect automations and processes run in the world, and that back in the 90s and early 2000s, that sort of was the mindset. Oh, there's a right way to do this, right? And you would spend tens of millions on a massive ERP implementation, and they worked, but they fell far short of delivering on their promise, that's for sure. Because every culture's a culture. They're all different. People are different. People work differently. And so
failure to recognize the human element of it was
basically failing to recognize, or underestimating, if not failing to recognize, it's desperately underestimating it. And so fast forward to the pandemic, and process and task mining tools have been around for a while, to be fair, but they didn't get much love and attention. And then with the forced sort of, changes in the workplace, work from home, hybrid work, suddenly they got attention because it was like, I don't know what's going on. Oh, here's a tool that can help me find out what's going on, right? And so initially it seemed like, oh, we're going back to the way we did things before. Let's figure it out. Let's find a perfect path and let's optimize on that perfect path. And I think this was the aha moment. You're right. I believe, somebody might tell me I'm wrong, but I believe Deep Analysis was the first analyst firm to do any market numbers actually for process and task mining. But it was during the work with them and talking to all those vendors and realizing, oh, there's so much more going on here.
Yes.
And I think I have a slide in my presentation tomorrow, which I threw in at the last minute. And it's basically process and task mining. If you're a vendor, if you're a systems integrator, what's the goal? To fix things, sell more licenses and more services, right?
Yes.
If you're an end user, to find out what the heck is going on, and
Yes.
possibly actually get rid of licenses and underused applications. It was two
Well, I think
very
that's one of the things. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that came out from the work that we've done here, is not to look at process and task mining in isolation to automation as isolation from low code and no code platforms, but rather to look at the nexus point between all of these, how they're kind of conglomerating together, and what do they collectively give you. And I think one of those things you pointed to now, which is, what is the value of what we do? What are the value of the tools we use to do the things that we do? And all of a sudden we can actually start to quantify these, not just in financial terms, and that's important, but also in human terms and process terms and outcome terms. And very early in this, we wanted to not think about this as purely being a drive towards efficiency, but thinking about this, about how this can contribute, when executed well, to the health of the organization. Part of the health of the organization being potentially efficiency or better financial stewardship, but also how that workforce interacts with those processes and interacts with each other. So that might be a little bit hippie-ish, but at least it gives a slightly nicer set of outcomes than just thinking about top line and bottom line factors.
Well, this is going to sound really pretentious, but I can't stop myself.
That's fine.
So I've been reading recently I've been reading about the history of Western philosophy, and it's just fascinating how you have these sort of mindsets, right? And it's just accepted. Oh yeah, that, Aristotle was right. Aquinas was right. And it takes hundreds of years sometimes before somebody goes, "Oh, I'm not so sure he was actually." And I think there's something akin to that here. We're not quite maybe on that level, but to me, this is the most holistic look at whatever you want to call it, right? The business process automation, the enterprise automation. It's the most holistic look at it, because from a buyer's perspective, they could care less whether it's an RPA. They could care less whether it's low code. They could think that they want to sort out their processes. They want to sort out their efficiencies. They want to have better insight. They want to be better prepared for when something goes wrong. So these sort of artificial silos, if you like, we've put them under one banner. And actually, purely from an economic side, I think the numbers we have here, tell you a much fuller and richer story. So whether you're a Pega, you're an Appian, you're a UiPath, you're an Apramore, you're a Salone, who cares, right? You're all in the same market. So that's what this report is. That's the market you guys are in. Yeah.
But also to see the interconnection between those markets, and also to see the interconnection between those markets, and how one potentially normally isolated technology silo has a huge dependence or interdependency on another. So looking at those markets on their own tells you something. Looking at those markets combined, particularly over a period of time, gives you a narrative to understand why does that market increasing, or when is that market decreasing during that period of time, that you don't get if you look at those markets on their own.
And in traditional terms, where the opportunities are, where the challenges are. And it's very analogous to the world of document management. I mean, so you had the ECM world, and then you had what were called at the time, nobody calls them this anymore, EFSS vendors, enterprise file sync and share.
Yep.
Right? So Box, Dropbox, Ignite. Well, they weren't included in any of the analysts' analysis of ECM, because for whatever, they didn't check the right boxes. But from a buyer's perspective, what is the difference between Box and OpenText? They're electronic systems for filing and accessing documents. It's the same thing here.
Yes,
it's very much the same thing. So they are different. There are different tools and there are different approaches, but they are interconnected. I would say they're dependent on one another as well, to a large part.
And thinking about things which are dependent upon it, on each other, we've made a point here about thinking about not just artificial intelligence, not just about humans and human intelligence, but the combination of the two, and combining the two together and making sure that they're complementary. And I think that's perhaps a little bit different to how AI has been looked at recently, where it seems to be very much a replacement for, rather than an aid to human intelligence.
I mean, we'll see, but it almost feels as if there's been a bit of a wait. I mean, you had the whole hyper automation stuff going on, which I guess is still going on. But I think buyers are smart enough to know that you can't automate everything. And you talk to any enterprise or big government department and they'll laugh. I mean, we wouldn't even know where to start, right? So these are big, complex, messy affairs. And the only sensible approach is to have that balance between AI and humans, because the AI is there for the unbelievable complexity. Right? And the scalability of doing certain things. I mean, AI plays a really important role. But if you haven't figured out the humans into this, it ain't gonna work. And somebody said this the other week about human workarounds, right? We actually had a presentation to even out some years ago, actually, which I think was in another exotic place, Delhi. I think that was about human workarounds. And you know, the point of that presentation was, yes, you should be trying to figure out a proper user journey. Yes. You should be, or a process diagram. You should do those, but don't ignore the fact that maybe the human workaround is actually the most efficient. Your workers are trying to get the job done. Maybe they know better than your system does.
Well, indeed. I mean, we all see when we're out and about what we can refer to as desire paths. So paths made by humans aren't necessarily, you know, the pavement or the sidewalk chosen route. Well, sometimes those are the right ways and sometimes they're the wrong ways. But what they shouldn't be is ignored. They should be included within your analysis and go, why are people taking that path? What are they gaining from that? Are they gaining efficiency? Are they making their workload easier? Are they making their lives more bearable? These are all really important things that we need to consider within that process analysis.
As opposed to just being slapped down and said, system says this, you should be doing this. Which is often the approach, right? So, no, I think this report's big. It's got a lot of detail. But to me, and this is just for me, it's twofold. One, I think some people will find it challenging because it's sort of challenging them, right? You know, here's your traditional silos. We're not sure that that's really the way you should be looking at things anymore. You know, we're saying this is more of a holistic, interdependent, intertwined, whatever set of markets, or maybe even a single market. But one of the offshoots of that is we've ended up with some of the most comprehensive sets of numbers that anybody's had.
Yes, and I think it's a report that contains AI in 2023 that doesn't actually talk at all about any generative AI, which I think in itself is probably, at least in the first quarter of this year,
we should get a gold star for that one, I would think.
Well, but we need to be compliant with the market, which gives us on to topic 3. Well, we're actually going to mention generative AI. So topic 3 is, and this relates to some announcements Google have made in the last couple of weeks. I mean, if we just talked about all the announcements that have happened in the world of generative AI just in the first quarter of this year, we would happily spend a couple of probably quite miserable, cynical hours talking about them. So you'll be pleased to hear, actually, what I want to talk to here about what Google is referring to as GenApp Builder isn't really necessarily about the details of generative AI and whether it's going to take over the world. It's more, how do companies that want to turn this technology into an on-ramp for businesses, how do they go about doing that? And is Google's first step a step that we could see organizations wanting to take? So the kind of the idea that we've been reading a lot about is about how generative models and the underlying large language models, so these colossal models that suck up enormous amounts of information to try and really produce type ahead, to try and predict what you're going to write, predict what you want to hear, and give you a kind of an answer that meets that. That's really the kind of, at least to my mind, the sort of fundamentals of how this technology so far is being presented. What Google have decided to do is to take a slightly pragmatic approach, which is, hey, if you want to start to actually add these experiences into customer-facing or employee-facing examples, what's going to be difficult for the business? Is it going to be integrating that? Well, probably not. Is it going to be dealing with the fact that large language models are colossal and require huge amounts of information? Yes, it's probably going to be that. So to give organizations a kind of on-ramp to do that. And the way they've gone about it is saying, well, if we take the existing large language models that we developed as Google, right, and we'll not change those, you can use those as is. What you take for a knowledge base to answer questions is to take your own website or collections of documents that you give it. We can use the large language model to handle the conversational stuff. Hey, hey, Alan, why are you in Brazil? The answer itself would actually come from these small collection of articles that I've approved from my own website or my own knowledge base to do that. So it gives you kind of the advantages of the conversational stuff that sounds like a human being potentially, but all the other advantages of only using your own data and not allowing third-party information, to change the answers or lead people in a different direction. Integrating this is a little bit of JavaScript, so it's not an enormously difficult thing for organizations to do. My kind of initial thoughts about this is actually it's usable to a point, but effectively it's a front end on Google custom search that's been around for 20 years, 15, 20 years. Does that really move things on for businesses? What does it allow them to do that they couldn't already do? I'm wondering what your thoughts are, Alan.
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I mean, you said at the beginning of this that we could talk forever on generative AI. I don't know that I could. I would lose patience way before. I think the thing here is there's a couple of things going on. The last X few months, ChatGPT came along and the world said, "Oh my God, it's so amazing!" And now you just can't switch on Twitter or the news or LinkedIn without somebody else posting a story about, "Oh my God, have you seen the stupid thing it just did or said or dangerous thing it's just done?" So I was at Legal Week a couple of weeks ago in New York, and unsurprisingly, this topic came up. And this is not scientific or anything, but we did put it in an analyst note on the website. Do you know this has put the fear of God into some legal firms? Legal firms who were really clattering down the road of AI as of last year. I do hope for those legal vendors and those legal firms that this doesn't put the brakes on it. Because it's like, whoa, what the hell? So you've got, on the one hand, the hype hasn't exactly delivered a ton of benefits. And what we've been arguing, and what's part of this, is that large language models, but the smaller sized large language models, right? In other words, designed for a specific use case around, I don't know, lipstick or some kind of chemistry or some kind of law.
I can see you've just come off a flight and been reading the in-flight magazine if you're straight away into cosmetics.
No, they don't have in-flight magazines anymore.
Don't they?
No, they cut the costs now.
That shows how long it has been since I've been on the road.
Yeah, and, but it's true. You've got micro sectors throughout the economy, right? And you could build a large language model for any one of those, and it could be incredibly useful because heck, it's going to be as good as a person, right? It might not get it right 100%, but it's going to be really damn accurate.
But the likelihood is our organizations going to do that because of the skill required to do it, because of the not just the computing power and money, that's one thing, but also managing those things over time when we know from prior use of AI, and I'm thinking about things like computer vision as an example, where it's not a case of creating a model that works as a fit and forget. It's something that has to be then fit into your change control mechanisms over time. Every time you make a change to this bunch of stuff, well, these models need to be updated as well. They need to become part of your organization.
That is the challenge, but I think where, and I don't know, being honest here, I don't know enough about this Google launch. You know more about it than I, but you can point it at your own data, right? But what kind of state is it in? Most people think their internal data is great. It's not. It's a complete mess. That's just the history of information management, right? Most people's data is not in a good shape at all. But I think there is an opportunity here for independent vendors to build very, very detailed and maintain large language models, rent them out.
Well, I think that's interesting, because even though I wasn't intending to talk about this, if you look at the announcements that Salesforce did previously last month about how they want to use large language models, they're saying, well, it's bring your own. We're going to allow you to plug this in. We're going to basically build a mart that makes the large LLM vendors, of which Google will be one, but there's a plethora out there. Plug those in, bring which ones you want, mix and match. Which is a pragmatic way of saying, hey, we don't want anything to do with building any damn LLMs. They're far too far away from our core business to do that. But plug your own ones in. That's what I mean. From the money that's gone into those organizations building those, that's certainly the way in which VC money has thought that was going to be. That ultimately the winners here are going to be people in control of building the LLMs, rather than the people who control the information in which the LLMs are built, which is an interesting way of balancing those sums.
I know we've said this on multiple client calls before, and we're not trying to be clever and come up with new terminology or anything, but things like OpenAI and that, I mean, are they really LLMs? I mean, because large is subjective, isn't it? These things aren't large; they're absolutely ginormous.
Yes.
Right? I mean, they've got everything that you could possibly scrape and dump in there. They're massive. In practical enterprise terms, or if you're a government that wants to use something, you're in defense, you're in finance, you're in whatever, the LLMs that would be relevant to you are not even 1% the size of this. They're tiny in comparison, but all they know is all you need to know. Right? I mean, they are so specialized, they know what they're doing. And to me, that's where the value is. I'm not against these big things, but for Microsoft to start, giving you autopilot out, great. And I'm not trying to be snarky, but it is sort of, the next version of Clippy or whatever, right? But so what? That's good. I think that's a good thing. I think if Microsoft wants to do that, if Google wants to, great, if it helps us do our work. But be careful you don't scare people off at a point where they've just got to the point where they're thinking, oh, maybe this AI stuff's pretty good, we should try this. And that seemed to be what was resonating at Legal Week. You always have a problem with lawyers, right? I mean, oh, that looks fantastic in a demo. What do you mean you need access to my data? Whoa, that's not happening. So that's always been a bridge that's got to be crossed in certain grounds. But if you put the fear of God into buyers through showing off, I think that's just setting you back.
I fear this is something that we will be returning to, whether we want to or not, repeatedly, as this starts to get bolted into areas that we're already working on and areas that people are coming to ask about. I think there's probably a little bit like how blockchain featured in every corporate PPT for a decade. I suspect that this may be elbowing that out, at least down one layer, saying, hey, what's our generative AI position here as a company? It's going to be something that a lot of people are going to be asking, and then hopefully asking us about.
Hopefully so, and but that's what we're here for, isn't it? Ultimately, that's what we're here for, to do the research and answer people's questions. That's what we try and do. But yeah, I think we'll see. I mean, I'm not sure when we're going to record the next one, but Dan and I will be in New Orleans for the AIM conference down there. And honestly, I'm going with an open mind. I have no idea what's going to be hot, what's not, and we'll see. But if I was to put a fiver on it, I suspect AI, generative AI will come up.
I think you're almost certainly right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it from this, hopefully around 30 minutes. I forgot to put a stopwatch on, so that's something to know for next time, is put a stopwatch on it. I have no long how long we've been recording on this. We'll see you next time.